1 second, I'll start sharing my screen. I'm just waiting for more people to join, but I'll start the class in a minute now. I'll inspect, and yes, we have this. All right, how many people do we have? We have 2 of them. That's fine. I'll just start and we'll just record the class. Last class, maybe started talking about the array callback methods, which is spoke about map and filter, all of those things, dot sum, dot every, dot filter, dot find. So any questions in that, just let me know before I start. No questions, all right. So next we're going to talk about like one of the last methods on arrays that I want to talk about, which is the reduce method. Now, just like map and filter and sum, every, find, and all of those things, we also have one more method called dot reduce, which works on top of the arrays. Now, dot reduce is a very powerful method which we can use to do like a lot of different things. Basically, what reduce does is it takes an array. Reduce is also an array method, by the way. So it takes an array and it reduces that to one single value. Okay, whatever, and you can return any type of value you want from reduce. See, we know that dot map and dot filter will always return to you an array, right? And dot sum and dot every always return to you a Boolean value. But when we use dot reduce, it can return any type of value based on what you want to return. That's why it's a very powerful method that we can use to return any kind of value that you want. Now let's see how it actually works. So let's say we have an array of numbers. So let's just say numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So we can do numbers, not reduce. Okay. This one takes a couple of different parameters. The first parameter is called this thing called accumulator. Second parameter is called the current value. You can call this whatever you want. Again, there is no like rule that you must call them these only. But if you call them this, it will be more easy to understand what actually does. Okay. Now, once you pass accumulator and current value, what will again happen is this callback function will run on every element of this array. Which means that first this callback method will run for this element, next for this element, next for this, and then this, and then this. Basically, it runs for every element within the array. But that's what dot map and dot filter also do. Then what is the difference between map, filter, and reduce is, first of all, this current value will represent whatever the current value is. Okay. Now let's see, we'll just do a console.log, but we'll just do a console.log of accumulator and current value. When you do, okay, first I'll just do the current value card this thing. We see that we get 2, 3, 4, and 5, which means that the current value initially in the first iteration is 2. Then you have 3, 4, and 5. But what about the accumulator? So if you look at accumulator is something which we go, first we get 1 and then we get undefined at the end, which means basically what's happening here is, so the best way to explain this is just by using an example. Let's say I want to sum up all the elements of this array. I want to sum all the elements of this array. So I basically want to do 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 and 5. And for that, what I'll do, so I'll just do accumulator plus current value. Okay. Now let's see the way this works is, and if I just do a console const result is equal to a console log of result, we get back 15. Now let's see how it actually works. Now in the first call, what happens is we go with the first element of the array. Now here the accumulator is basically let me change this as elements here. 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11. Okay, we have this. Now accumulator in the first iteration, the accumulator will be this whatever the first number is, which is 3. And the current value will be whatever the second number is, which is this number. So 5. Now in the first call, okay, which means when this callback is run for the first time, the accumulator value will be whatever the first value is, and current value will be whatever the value after this thing is, which is this number, which means we get 3 and 5. Now what happens is, whatever you return from the callback, that value will be stored as the new accumulator value. Let me repeat that. Whatever you return from the callback, that will be added to the next value of accumulator, which means in the second call, what happens is the accumulator will now be what? This value, whatever the previous thing was, which means the value will be 3 plus 5, it will be 8. And this time the current value will be, this is done, so it will be this value, which means the current value will be 7. Okay, let me repeat again what happened. We'll go from scratch again. So when we call the callback for the first time, the accumulator will be whatever the first value that is, which is number 3. And current value will be whatever comes after 3, which is the number 5. And whatever you return from the callback, that will become the new value of accumulator in the next call. So second call may, this time the accumulator ka value is 8. And current value is, because we are done with 5, we should go on to this one. Current value will be 7. Okay. Now third call may, what happens again? Third call may, because we're returning this thing again, which means 8 plus 7, and hence the accumulator value will be 15. And current value will be what? The next number, which is 8. Fourth call again, you have to do this plus this, because we're returning that value here. which means we get 24 as the accumulator value. Accumulator will be 24. And find the current value will be what? Current value will be 9. Sorry, it will be 11. This was 9. And I forgot. Yeah, this is the one. Basically, in the first call, the accumulator ka value will be whatever the first number is, which is number 3. And the current value will be whatever the number comes after that, which is this. And whatever you return from the callback, that will be returned inside the accumulator, which means next call may that will become the value of the accumulator, because the accumulator will accumulate the value from every iteration. So accumulator kya karta hai ki whatever value you return from the callback, that will be the new value of the accumulator in the next call. And hence ultimately, because we are done, when we say the current value is 11, which means we are done covering all the elements, and then we return this value, which will be 35, and whatever will be the accumulator value at the very end of the loops, that will be returned to the result. And that is what we're printing here. Guys, do you want me to repeat this?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we'll go from starting again. First of all, okay, we have these numbers 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11. Reduce is an array method which takes in one callback, and the callback takes in 2 parameters. Okay, the first parameter, if we call it accumulator, which basically accumulates or it collects all the values from all the previous iterations. And current value is always whatever it starts with the second value. So accumulator will be the first value in the first call, and then the current value will be the second value, which means this will become 3 and this will become a value of 5. Now let's say first call, when this callback will run for the first time, that time the accumulator will be a value of 3, and the current value will actually be 5. Are things clear till here?
Yes, sir.
So again, let me just repeat. So accumulator will be the first element and current value will be the second element, which means this is accumulator, this is current value. Now, whatever you return from this, let's say we're going to return this one, which means we're returning 3 plus 5 is equal to 8. We're returning this. Now the return value will be 8. Now what will happen is in the second call, what will be the value of accumulator? It will be whatever you return here. जो भी return हुआ था यहाँ पर, that will be the accumulator का value this time, which means it will be 8 this time. Okay. Now current value will be what? Because we are done with 5. Yeah, 1 second. My system has become very slow. No, because we are done with 5, we have to move the next number, which is 7.
7.
And what you return from this is
15.
Because we do 8 plus 7 and then return 15 here. Now third call mein, what will be the value of accumulator?
15.
Perfect. So it will be 15. What will be the current value ka value?
9.
9. What are we returning?
24.
Perfect. Now fourth call. What is the accumulator?
24,
24,
Perfect. What is the current value?
11,
11,
11. Perfect. What is the return value?
35,
35. Now, because we are done with all the elements, this will be the final value of accumulator. And once we're done with all the elements of the array, this will be returned as the final result. And that is what we see when we do a console log of result. We see that answer here. Make sense? Now, the question might be, so when to use dot reduce? See, dot reduce can actually be used for multiple things. I can't cover everything now here, but I'll give you one more example of how we can use the reduce thing. Okay. So what I'll do, I'll create an array called grades 89, 96, 58, 77, 62, 93, 81, 99, and 73. Let's say these are the grades that we have. I'll just remove this. Okay. Now I want to get the top score from this array. Like I want to get the top score of this array, and I know the top score 99, but how do I get it? Of course, we actually have this method called math.max, right? So we can just do console.log of grades dot, sorry. You have to do math.max. But math.max actually expects us to give in individual arguments. We have to give like 89, 90. So you have to give all of them like this, basically. Now we get the correct answer, which is, but we cannot pass as an array. If you try to pass the array itself, it will give you not a number. Because math.max actually expects you to give individual arguments like that. You can't pass an array. But there is one way we can still use math.max with array, which we'll talk about next after some time. But what we'll do now is we'll just we'll try to do the reduce thing. Let's say const top score actually be grades.reduce. And this time I'll call the accumulator as max, and I'll call the current value as curve value, or curve value like this. What else says if the current value is greater than max, then return the curve value. And if it's not greater than max, then I have to return the max value itself. Okay, now if I try to do a console.log of top score, we get 99. We'll see how this works with respect to the calls. Now we'll see the first call. What is the accumulator? What is the max value, guys?
89,
Perfect. And what is the curve value?
96,
96. Now let's look at the return value. What will be returned? Let's see. So we're checking if the current value 96 greater than max, which means it is a true, right? Because 96 is greater than 89. So which means we return what?
$185.
No. See, observe here. I'm saying, look at the condition here. I'm saying if the current value is greater than the max value, which means if 96 is greater than 89,
96,
return this.
96,
Perfect. Okay. Now, second call may, what will be the max value?
96,
Perfect. What will be the current value?
58,
58. And what will be this time? What will happen? We'll see if current value, which is if 58 is greater than 96, which is a false value, which means we'll not return this. We'll return this. What will be the return value this time?
96,
That's it. Now third call me again. What will be the max value again?
96.
Perfect. What will be the current value?
77.
77. Return.
96.
That's it. I copy and paste. This is 96. What will be the current value now?
62.
62. Return value.
96.
That's it. I copy and paste 96, and this will become 93. This will still be 96.
96.
And this will actually be fourth, fifth call. This will be the sixth call. This will be what? Still 96 only. This will actually become 81. So that can be 96. Now again, I know this is happening very frequently, but this time we get 99 here. And what will the return value this time?
99.
That's it. And this time again, the last call, which is the eighth call, is the last call. Max will be 99, and current value will be
99.
what is the current value?
Here, 73.
73, and return will be 99 only.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so basically this is what we'll be returning. We get 99 here. So that is how it actually works. So any questions here?
Sir, wait. सर जी ऐसे नहीं हो सकता कि जैसे हम उसमें करते हैं जावा में करते हैं कि एक सी प्लस प्लस में सर सी में किया था कि हम सिंगल पहले फर्स्ट वैल्यू लेंगे उसे सबके साथ कंपेयर करेंगे, फिर सेकंड लेंगे सबके साथ कंपेयर करेंगे, थर्ड लेंगे सबके साथ कंपेयर करेंगे कि ग्रेटर देन कौन सा, ऐसा नहीं हो सकता इसमें?
नहीं, सो रेड्यूस में तो वो नहीं हो सकता है. My point is, see, there are multiple ways you can get the top score from this. Okay, multiple ways. You can use a for loop, you can use math.max, you can use many other things. मेरा क्या intention था कि I wanted to show you how it can be done using dot reduce.
जी सर. ओके सर.
Reduce use करके how can you get the top score was what my intention was.
ओके सर. थैंक यू सर.
ठीक है, no problem. Actually, sir, show something else. अभी थोड़ा और we'll go to a little bit more complex problem. Group by reduce JavaScript. यहाँ पर एक example रहेगा. ये कौन था वो? रॉबिन. स्पेलिंग पक्का रॉन्ग है. हाँ, this one. Actually, this will be a little more complex for you. But let's not go with this for now. Okay, anyway, so this was about the reduce thing. So reduce can be used for multiple things, not just for top score and all that, but for multiple things it can be used for. Now, what we will do is we'll move on to the next topic, JavaScript mein, which is what, 1 minute, let me open up my notes. So array callback methods are done. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some new JavaScript features that were introduced, in year 6 and above that. Okay, so we're going to talk about all of those important things. We already spoke about the arrow functions. We spoke about the string template literals. We spoke about let and const, for off loop, the for in loop. We spoke about the exponent operator. We spoke about the includes. We spoke about object.values. But there are a few other things that we need to talk about, and we'll talk about those things today. So what happens is, let's say there is a function called multiply, which takes in a couple of parameters, a and b. Okay, and we just return a into b. And let's say I do a const result is equal to, I do a multiply of 10 and 19. And this time I print out the result like this. 1 minute. Okay, I get 190, which is perfect. But what if I try to actually, I forget to give one of the arguments. This is possible. Sometimes sometimes the function might not get all the arguments. This case, let's see what happens. We get not a number. But what I want to do is, in case they miss out the second argument, I want to give it a default value of 1. Because see, if multiply 10 hai, then it should behave like 10 into 1, because I basically want b to have a default value of 1. Okay? Now the old way of doing this was, first we'll check if b exists or not. It'll be like b is equal to, like a type of b. Okay, first of all, let's just see let's do a console log and see what we get as b. We get b as undefined. Okay, when you do not send a parameter, when you do not pass an argument, that parameter will have a default value of undefined. But I do not want it to have undefined. I actually want it to have value of 1 if it's undefined. What I can do in that case is I can say b is equal to a type of b not equal to undefined. Then we can give b, or we can give 1. Okay. What I'm saying in this case is, still not number b, type of b not equal to undefined. Console log would be oh sorry, they should be in strings. I'm so sorry. Now it will give 10. Now what I'm trying to do is, see, what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to assign it a default value of 1 if the type of b is undefined. So in case we do not give a value of b, which means the type of b will be undefined, and hence we'll be returning 1 as the value. Guys, do you know how the ternary operator works? I think you already spoke about it, right? We spoke about ternary operator. Is that done?
Yes.
So basically what I've done, so all I've done here is मैं check कर रहा हूँ कि अगर type of b undefined नहीं है, then return the b itself. But if it is undefined, then return 1 as the value of b. Which means this time if you see, we get b ka value as 1. Ultimately we're returning a into 1, which means 10 into 1, return value of 10. This was the old way of doing it. But now the newer way of doing it is very simple. We call it default parameters, and you just do a default, say b is equal to 1. As simple as that. All I've done is I'm saying कि अगर b का value undefined है, okay, if the value of b is undefined, then assign it a value of 1 as a default value, only if the value is undefined. But if I try to give it, let's say 19, I get 190, which means this value of 1 will be assigned to b only when there is no value for b here.
Sir, same thing happened with a.
Yes, we can do same thing with a also. Let's say we give a value of 100 here, and if you forget to give this, we get 100. Right now, see, right now,
if we give the value of b is 10, only b. Yes.
So you have to give some value na, to something. You can't pass in just like this. This is not possible. You have to pass in some value for a. Let's say you pass in undefined here. Then this will be 100, and b will be 10. That's where we get 1000. But it's not possible to just pass second parameter. It's not possible like this. Okay, this will give an error.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Basically, if a or b don't have values, which means in this case both a and b are undefined, and when they are undefined, we assign a value of 100 and 1 to both of them. This is called default parameters. Okay.
Yes.
Now next topic we'll talk about is this thing called spread operator. Spread operator, very, very important. You'll be using this all the time in React. Okay. And that is, let's say I have an array, let's say old array is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 like this. Now what I want to do is I want to create a new array which has like 4, 5, and 6, but I also want to add these numbers after these, which means I basically want to do this. I want to copy this and paste them here. मुझे ये result चाहिए ultimately, which means after 4, 5, 6, I want to add whatever numbers are there in this one. I want to add them here. The way I can do this, so see, if I add directly the old array here now, and if I try to do a console.log of new array, what will happen is, see, I get 4, 5, and 6, but the fourth element is actually the array itself, which is this. But I don't want that. What I want is I want to do this console.log of an array and this. I want this as the answer. Look at the difference between this and this. I don't want the array itself. I want the individual numbers, which means what I want to, मुझे क्या करना है? I want to like copy all these numbers, copy all the elements from that array and spread it inside this array. And for that, we'll use the operator called a spread operator, which is just to do dot, dot, dot. When we do a dot, dot, dot of an array, whatever elements are there inside that array, they will be spreaded out inside this array, which means you're plucking out these elements or these items and then adding them here, which means now this and this are exactly the same. Okay, so you can basically use this to copy an array also. Let's say I have one more example. Let's say I have const names A and B and C. Okay, we have this copy of names. If you want to do a copy of, like if you want to just do a copy of this array, which is what you will use the spread operator most commonly for, you can just do dot, dot, dot of names. But this dot, dot, dot must be present inside an array. You cannot just do like this. This will not work. This will give an error. When I save it, you'll see an error here. So the dot, 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 the spread operator must always happen inside an array like this. And if I do a console.log of copy with names, on copy of names, then I get the same elements inside this array. Also, this array and this array are not the same. This is a completely new copy of this array. Okay, we are not sending the existing array to this one. We're only sending the elements inside this array here. In this case, the spread operator is actually used to like copy and spread it out here. Okay, now this is one use case of spread operator. Now one more thing, let's say after adding this, I also want to add other elements like D and C. This also is possible. You see all of this like this, and you can even add other stuff like 0, 1, and then do this and then like this. Basically, what will happen in this case is these 3 elements will be added here. Like the 3 will be copied and they'll be pasted here like this. That's what the 3 dots thing do. This is the spread operator. You're spreading out the items of this names array inside this array. Now this is one use case. Remember, you're doing the spread operator inside an array. One more use case is inside a function call. Like let's say I have a function const nums is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So like I said, we can use math.max to basically get the maximum of numbers, but we always have to pass them individually like this. We have to pass them like this individually. Only then it will work. Okay, so only then this will work. Now what will happen is if I change this to an array, and if I give this array here, if I give the nums array here, this will not work. Okay, but what you can do is you can do the spread operator thing inside a function call also. Like when you're calling a function, okay, when you're calling a function, you can actually pass the spread operator here by doing just dot 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 here. When you do dot 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 nums, what you're saying is just you're taking all those elements and spreading it out here. You're spreading it out, which means basically you're doing this mat dot max, and you're adding these elements individual like this. This is what the spread operator is doing. It's spreading out all the elements of the array inside the function call. So I'm stressing on the word call because we use the spread operator only inside a function invocation, not function definition. Okay. One more example I'll show you. Let's say we have a function sum a, b, c, d, e. This expects 5 values, and we do a console.log of a, b, c, d, and e. Now, if I want to call this sum function with the numbers of this, I basically want a to be 1, b to be 2, c3, d4, and e5. Now, the old way of doing it is you have to do nums of 0, and then nums of 1, and nums of 2. Let me just copy. This will be 3 and 4, and this will be 5. And this will, that's this nums before initiation. Sorry, I have to use this here. So this time we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is printed here. But this is a very tedious process. The easier way of doing it is you use a spread operator, which means you do sum of dot 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 nums. When you do dot 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 nums, you're saying take all the elements of this array and add them individually inside the sums array, which means you're basically doing whatever you're doing here, that's what we're doing with this. But this is a very simple way of doing it. So you take out the elements of the array and you spread it inside the function call like this. So any questions so far, guys?
No, sir.
Okay. So far we have discussed 2 use cases of spread operator. One was in arrays and the other one is in function call. But there is one more use case as well, and that is within objects. Now let's say I have a parent object. Const parent is equal to name is equal, I'll just say id1 and location will be Hyderabad. Now if I want to create a child object, but I want the same 2 properties as well. Apart from this, I wanted one more. I want to add name also, but I want to add these both properties as well inside this object. Now the way I can, obviously one way is I have to again just copy and paste it here. This is one way. The other way is I can do id will be parent.id and location will be parent.location. This is one more way. But the easier way is I can just do dot 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 and parent. When I do dot 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 parent, whatever properties are there inside them, all of them will be spread out inside this object, which means this and this will be added inside this object. And this time if I just do a console.log of child, we get all the properties. We get the properties which are there in parent and the child as well. What dot 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 does in this case is it takes up all the properties within the parent object and spreads it inside this object. Okay, so it's taking up these things, it's adding it inside this object. One more example. Const feline is equal to flex4 family Felidane or Felidae, and this will basically be canine. Family be canine and furry true. Now let's say I want to create a dog object by passing in these properties first and one more property which I want to add. So basically for me to add these properties, I have to just do dot 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 and canine, which means right now if I just do a console.log of dog, I get back these properties, whatever there, they get added to this object, but I can even add anything extra. You can just do ispet is equal to true. In this case, what happens? First of all, I'm spreading out the canine object, which means I'm adding these both properties inside this object, and then I'm adding one more property as well, which is ispet. Okay. Now one more thing I can do is, let's say if I do const lion is equal to dot 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 feline and this, and if I do a console.log of lion, you get back this object, which means by doing dot 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 of feline, we are taking out these both properties and spreading them out here, and then I'm adding one more new property as well, like this. Lastly, we'll do an example called cat dog, which will be a combination of both of these, which means I can just do dot 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 of feline and dot 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 of canine. When I'm doing this, I'm spreading out all the properties within this and all the properties within this inside this object, which means this object will now contain the properties which are there in this and as well as this. So remember, we have three use cases of the spread operator. We can use it for arrays. Basically, you can use it to create inside a new array, you can spread out the properties. And second thing is inside the function calls, you can spread out the arrays. And third use case is this. You can spread out the properties inside another object. Basically, you can use array and array, and you can use array in function, and you can use object in object. These three are the use cases of the split operator. So any questions so far, guys?
No, sir.
Okay. So let's get rid of this. We're done with this. Next, we have this thing called the rest operator. Now, basically, the spread operator looks like this, right? Spread operator looks like dot dot dot. The rest operator also looks like dot dot dot. But there's a difference between them both. Okay, the difference is, let's say, I'll tell you how do we use the rest operator. So let's say we have a function called a comma b, and let's call it greet or whatever, and we'll just do a console.log of a comma b. Now I'm going to call this greet with 1 comma 2. I get 1 comma 2, I get back. But let's in the future I decide to call it with greet of 1 comma 2 comma 3 and 4 also. But in this case, we're not sure that how many How many parameters will be passed here? Now, if I say, okay, because he's adding 2 more parameters, let me add C and D. And if I do like C and D here, the problem here is in the first case, C and D will be undefined because we are not passing C and D. In this case, it will work fine because we are passing. But in the first case, again, same problem, undefined, undefined. Basically, the issue here is we are sure that we will always get the first 2 arguments. वो तो हमको पक्का पता है. We know for sure that we will get A and B. लेकिन A और B के बाद I'm not sure how many else I'll get. I have no idea. What I want to do is, no matter how many ever I get, I want to store them inside an array. Okay? Which means, let's say I call this thing with 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. Okay? So I know for sure that हमको A और B तो पक्का मिलेगा. But apart from A and B, whatever else we get inside every function call, like 3 and 4 in this case, or 3, 5, 4, 6 in this case, or 3 to 8 in this case, all of them must be stored inside an array, which I can then use for whatever I want. And that is what we'll use the rest operator for. All you have to do is just do ... rest. In this case, if I just do a console log of rest, we get back an array. So initially, when we call with this, because this is A and this is B, we do not need rest, we get back an empty array. But the second case, 1 is A and 2 is B, but these both will be stored inside the rest operator, which is an array of 3, 4. In this case, again, 3 se leke 6 tak, that will be stored inside a variable called rest, which is basically an array that contains these values. And same thing in the last case as well. Basically, what I'm saying is, jo bhi bacha hua hai, whatever is remaining, whatever is the rest of the parameters, add them inside this rest variable, and this will always be an array. And this you can use it however whatever way you want. But basically, I know for sure that I'll always get A and B, but rest of it I'm not sure, so I'm going to just say rest now. That's how this works. In fact, you can just do the rest of everything. What will happen is every single thing that you send will be added to an array called rest. Rest will be an array that will contain all of these arguments. Okay, any questions, guys?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay, we'll cover one last topic before we end the class, because almost 10 anyway. So we're going to talk about this thing called destructuring. So I'll talk about object destructuring today, and tomorrow we'll pick it up from the array destructuring. So the topic is destructuring. Destructuring. So let's say, so I'll give an example why this exists in the first place. Let's say we have an object, user object, ID will be 1, and name will be Miles Morales, and city will be Dublin, whatever. Now let's say if I want to create one variable called ID, which has the same value, I do const ID is equal to user.id. Let's say I want to also create one more variable called name, which has this value. I do the same thing. I say name and I say user.name. I remove all of this. User.name. Let's say I want to create one more variable called city with this value. I do the same exact thing. I just say city and I say user.city. This time we have 3 new variables which basically have these values. Now imagine there are multiple more properties. If you have to create a variable for every single thing, that will be a problem, right? You have to keep adding the same line again and again. Now this will come especially, I mean this case will come a lot in React, because React may you keep passing a lot of stuff to the functions, that and inside the function you want to create a variable, and you can't keep doing this. That's why we have a better solution for this. That is, let's forget these both things. Let's see how we can do this in using object destructuring. So we'll say object destructuring. The way we do it with object destructuring is we say const first of all, and then we give an empty curly braces, and we say is equal to which object you want to destructure, which is user in this case. Now inside this, we give all the properties for which you want to create new variables. Okay, first of all, you do const an empty object is equal to user. Now from this user, what are the properties you want to create the new variables for? Let's say I want to create a new variable for just ID this time, that's it, which means I will do ID here. I'll just remove this, and this time when I do a console.log of ID, मुझे 1 आएगा. All I've done here is I've destructured the ID from user, which means this is basically doing const ID is equal to user.id. These both are exactly the same, no difference at all. But instead of doing this, we are doing this. Now the advantage with this is I can destructure multiple properties at the same time. So I can say ID and name also. This is equivalent to doing this, name and name. What we did in one line, we have to do in 2 lines if you don't use object destructuring. And if I just do a comma name, I get the name here. Like this. Let's say I want to destructure the city also. So I say city, use a city here. With the city, yeah. So I get city also here. And by the way, the order doesn't matter. The order can be anything. Like this, it can be anything. Okay. Order का कुछ मतलब नहीं है यहाँ पर. ठीक है? So we still get the same values here. This is called object destructuring, wherein you are creating a variable with the name city based on user.city. You're creating a new variable called name, which is nothing but user.name. So whatever the property name is, that should exactly match the variable name. So अगर यहाँ पर name है, this should be name. अगर यहाँ पर ID है, then it should be ID. Okay. But what if, let's say if I remove ID, and if I do ID this time, ID of console of ID is being undefined, because ID है ही नहीं यहाँ पर. But I want to say कि अगर ID नहीं है, if the user object does not contain ID, then give it a default value of something. And the simple way of doing it is just to is equal to and give 100 or whatever you want. This time the ID has a default value, but if you give back the ID value of 1 again, this will get picked up. This will come into the picture only if the ID does not exist. Like if I remove the ID now, so ID does not exist, that's why ID picks up a value of 100. But if the ID exists here, it takes the value of 1 and not 100. One more thing, let's say there is already a variable called city, and this is something else, maybe like this. In this case, there will be a problem. This is saying that identifier city has already been declared, so we cannot destructure city anymore because city बोल के already एक है. This case, what we can do is, if you want to rename the variable after destructuring it, you have to just give a colon, give a new value, say new city or whatever, and this will be This will basically be user.city, but the variable name now is new city. Okay, so if you want to change the variable name after destructuring it, just use the colon here. Let's say I want name to be username, and I can use it here like this. Like this. Yeah. You can also combine this and this. You can say if username doesn't exist, then give a value of Spidey. Let's remove this thing now. You get Spidey here, because let me explain what's happening here. This specific part let me explain. I'm saying कि first of all name का जो property है, इसमें से वो निकाल के create a variable called username, which will basically be user.name. लेकिन अगर ये name property है ही नहीं इस object में, then give it a default value of Spidey, which means right now the variable called username it has a value of Spidey.
Sir,
Yes, I'm sorry, I had a power cut, so I had to drop off. So, ठीक है, मेरा host का चला गया है. Anyway, so that was what I want to talk about the spread operator and the restructuring. Any questions there, guys? Rajendra, Rohit.
सर जैसे हमने लिखा नेम डॉट यूजर नेम, फिर हमने इक्वल्स टू डाल के आगे वो लिख दिया, कोई भी नेम लिख दिया, लेट कर दिया. सर जैसे हमने उधर लिखा हुआ था नेम अगर ना हो, हमने यूजर नेम लिखा है सर, नेम आगे लिखा यूजर नेम, लेकिन अगर हम नीचे कंसोल डॉट लॉग में नेम लिख दें तो वो एरर देगा कि नहीं देगा?
एरर देगा ना, बिकॉज क्या हुआ है कि हम लोगों ने नेम को डिस्ट्रक्चर किया है, लेकिन द वेरिएबल व्हिच वी क्रिएटेड इज यूजर नेम, which means there is no variable called name. There is a variable called username, but no variable called name.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
जी sir.
ठीक है. So फिर we'll meet. I'll see you tomorrow, guys. Good night. Have a good night.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye bye.